Good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for being here. I'm start presenting myself. I'm Carlos Vasco. I'm National Advisor at Chilean Chamber of Construction. I'm the President on the Productivity, Innovation and Sustainable Construction Council. And I welcome you to this interesting and entertaining exhibition on the circular economy, a highly contingent subject that would undoubtedly bring us a lot today. To start today, I remind you that we will have two great exhibitors where we'll address the principles of circular economy and the main business models in the construction industry. Your participation is very important to us. Therefore, we invite you to be part of the discussion and ask questions. So at the end of the day in the panel, we can ask your questions in order to have a richer meeting. To help us with this, will also be part of a conversation. Catherine Martinez, she's a manager on the CDT, that's a corporation of technology development and the Chilean Chamber of Construction. But well, now yes, to start this journey, I want to leave you with one of the first exhibitors this morning for us. She's late at night in Australia. Jane Morris, she is a Chief Operating Officer at Corio, who today will bring us an interesting and entertaining presentation where projects to have known to apply sustainability in the projects will be highlighted. Please, founders, go ahead. Thank you very much for being here. And Morris, Jane, thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to chat to you. I'm just going to share my screen now and we can get started. So, as Carlos said, my name's Janie Morris and I'm the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Corio. So thank you for having me today. I usually present alongside my co-founder and the CEO of our company, Ashley, but she couldn't join me as she fell ill this evening. So please excuse me if I'm a little bit fumbly with my presentation. Today, I'm going to share our journey from humble beginnings to our work, catalyzing circular economy action here in Australia. I'm going to share the principles and business models of the circular economy and provide you with insight into several of our circular economy projects with Lend-Lease, Mirvac, and the Queensland Investment Corporation. So, some of you might be familiar with our organisation, but for those of you who aren't, we advise and guide industry and government through their circular economy aspirations at both a strategic and operational level. We are a young company with a bold mission to catalyse the global transition to a circular economy. We are working in projects in Australia, New Zealand, and the United States in all aspects of the economy, from mining, tourism, agriculture, and the built environment, with some of the world's largest companies. But where did we start? So something you probably don't know is that I founded this company with my sister, Ashley. So we are both incredibly purpose-driven. And in 2017, we were having a conversation about the state of the world. Ash had spent the previous 5 years working in Indonesia on some of the world's most intractable environmental issues, from deforestation to electronic waste. During this time, she was becoming increasingly aware that she was only ever working on the symptoms of the problem and not the problem itself, which is our linear take, make, waste economy. It was about this time too that I began to understand and acknowledge the negative effects the linear economy was having on our communities and our social fabric, an area that I had spent my professional career addressing. As such, in early 2017, when Ash spoke to me about the circular economy and how she believed it could be the systemic antidote to many of the challenges we were facing, I wanted to learn more. However, at this time in Australia, several reports had been released quantifying the value. The World Economic Forum said it could be a $26 billion economy by 2025. And the South Australian government had also released a report called Creating Value, quantifying the transition in terms of carbon emissions and job creation. And to be honest, it all looked like sunshine and roses. But when we looked around at the Australian landscape, it was all talk. We couldn't see any action. So I told Ash what people needed to understand was what a circular economy looked like in practice. It was time to do something. So I said to her, are you going to do it? And she said, if I'm doing it, you are too. So with our mind set to the task of proving the value of the circular economy, we began on the March 15th in 2017 in our newly formed office, which also actually handily doubled as our bedroom. For 6 months, we worked with 45 businesses on one city street in Queensland to implement 6 circular economy concepts. This was Australia's first circular economy proof of concept project. Over the 6 months, we delivered 22 projects with that street, including a reverse logistics for plastic program, a food mile study, a business-to-business asset sharing platform, bin sensors, electricity monitors, and more. Fundamentally, the circular experiment was a wild success, and fast forward 3 years, we are making progress towards our mission. We have been fortunate enough to be invited to the United Nations General Assembly, represent Australia at the World Circular Economy Forum, and we've been recognised by 2 former Prime Ministers, including the Honourable Malcolm Turnbull. Okay, so a question that we sought to answer back in 2017. What is the circular economy? Well, the circular economy is not just anything. It does not have one answer, but rather a set of possibilities. A circular economy aims to redefine growth, focusing on values and value creation. It is an economic model that is designed to be restorative and regenerative, underpinned by gradually decoupling economic activity from the consumption of finite resources, designing waste and pollution out of the system, and transitioning our energy to renewable sources. The circular economy distinguishes between technical and material and biological materials. Biological materials such as cotton, food, and wood are treated as nutrients in a circular economy. These materials should be returned to regenerate our natural systems, such as our soils, to provide renewable resources for the economy. Technical materials, such as steel and oil-based plastics, are treated as hard durables that need to be recovered and restored through strategies like reuse, repair, remanufacture, or in the last resort, recycling. It is important to note that no material ever leaves our biosphere. They just change form depending on how they are valued. In contrast to the linear economy, the circular economy is all about integration, so as to enable feedback loops and synergies. In a circular model, things become multifunctional, which works not to just close loop, but to also create more resilient systems because they're more self-sufficient and less dependent. In a circular economy, there should be no more silos. As powerfully stated by Dame Ellen MacArthur, the circular economy isn't about one manufacturer changing one product. It's about all of us coming together, our companies and our governments. It's about rethinking and redesigning the operating system itself. Now, the circular economy concept isn't new. It has deep-rooted origins and can't be traced back to one single date or author. It's underpinned by a number of schools of thought, including cradle to cradle, industrial ecology, biomimicry, regenerative design, and permaculture. So people often ask us how the circular economy fits with the climate agenda. In 2019, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, in collaboration with Material Economics, released a study highlighting that while moving to renewable energy and implementing energy efficiency measures can address 55% of global greenhouse gas emissions, to achieve the UN climate goals, it is imperative that we tackle the remaining 45% through the circular economy, specifically looking at how we produce and consume 5 key material types, including food, steel, cement, plastic, and aluminium. So currently, there are more than 100 different definitions of circular economy, but put simply, the circular economy is a new way of looking at relationships between markets, customers, and natural resources. In the context of the built environment, this means that our cities will give more than they take. They will prioritize modularity and multifunctionality, ensuring that spaces serve multiple purposes and multiple community segments. They will not only consume energy and water, but will also produce energy and manage water. So the circular economy, it has 3 key principles. Principle number 1 is designing out waste and pollution. The most important part about this principle are the first 2 words. We really need to think about designing waste out and not designing with waste. Ashley and I often use the analogy of an overflowing bathtub. What is the first thing you reach for? A mop, or do you start thinking about how you turn off that tap? The second principle in a circular economy is keeping products and materials in use at their highest value for as long as possible. The most important part about this principle are the 2 words highest value. In a circular economy, recycling is the loop of last resort. Before we recycle, we want to think about how we refuse, how we reuse, remanufacture, refurbish. The third principle of a circular economy, and the one that's most often overlooked because it's challenging, is how we regenerate our natural systems. As a society, we've gone past the point of being able to do less bad. We need to do more good. So those are the 3 principles of a circular economy, and there's also 5 supporting business models. So these principles and business models should be used like a toolkit. When you're thinking about how to implement circular economy, you should use these tools to affect change. Okay, now that you have an overview of the fundamentals of a circular economy, I want to share with you some case studies of the circular economy in the built environment. In 2018, we began work with Lend-Lease to deliver Australia's first circular economy master planned community, Yarrabilba. To give you an idea of some background, Yarrabilba is a greenfield community located 40 minutes southwest of Brisbane, which is the Queensland capital, that will have 17,000 homes, 11 schools, and over 100 hectares of mixed industry and business areas in completion on 2042. The journey to creating Lend-Lease's flagship circular economy community began with their team questioning what the circular economy was and what benefit it could provide to Yarrabilba. To answer this question, our team collaborated to deliver a workshop for Lend-Lease and representatives from the local and state government and also the community to create a vision and ideate circular economy projects that would lead into the development of a strategy. To develop the circular economy strategy, we firstly mapped the stakeholders and inputs and outputs of Yarrabilba on a local, state, and global level. We then developed concepts to integrate utilities, valorize material flows, and empower behavioural change towards circular economy for the residents. We then refined and prioritised the circular economy projects to form an actionable roadmap for the lifespan of the development. This work culminated in the More Than Waste Circular Economy Master Plan Community Strategy, which is currently being endorsed by Economic Development Queensland. So this strategy is systemic and considers agriculture, water, energy, waste, transport, technology, and education. So where do you start? Well, firstly, a strategy is only as good as the action that follows it. And accordingly, we continue to work with Lend-Lease to turn the strategy's roadmap into tangible progress for the community. The first project we kicked off was a data strategy that feeds into the circular economy data project that we're currently working on. It is critically important on any project to understand baseline data so you can measure impact. For Lend-Lease and the Yarrabilba community, it is essential that we understand the energy, water, and transport and resource use and generation, how and what was done with those utilities and resources at the end of their use. Through the Circular Economy Data Project, the intention is for 500 households in Yarrabilba to participate for 2 years in a data monitoring program for water, waste, electricity, and transport. The data will be used to inform the design of the circular economy initiatives, to monitor the performance of any initiatives that are implemented, and to inform the progress towards the strategy's KPIs and targets of the More Than Waste strategy. Pardon me. The next project we are working on is one that stemmed from a very real and wicked challenge in the built environment. And I'm sure it's one people can sympathise with. It is the use of polystyrene. So polystyrene waste was an entrenched issue on site at Yarrabilba and was causing significant amenity challenges. To tackle this problem, we are currently working with the local social enterprise to develop a construction waste diversion system on site for builders at Yarrabilba. We will be modelling our system off the Victorian-based Outlook Enterprise model, which focuses on the employment of chronically disadvantaged job seekers that successfully diverts 85% of materials by weight to other industries. In this system, the construction waste is to be diverted by access, transported to an off-site facility, but with a view to keep the materials on site in the near future. Materials will then be sorted, valorized, and resold to local offtake partners. Pardon me. So by undertaking these two projects, we recognize that our first steps towards action in the circular economy strategy centered on material flows through the community. The priority is to keep the value of these materials in the community to the value of the residents. The next project we want to talk to you about is one that's a little bit different, and it stemmed from the Circular Economy Lab. So just for some context, the Circular Economy Lab was an initiative that we developed that was funded by the Queensland government and had participation from 26 global organisations. Lendlease was a foundation partner of the lab and was supported by industry actors, Fisher and Paykel, and a number of different businesses. So during the lab, the challenge that Lendlease wanted to work through was how to address the application of circular economy principles and business models, and how might they create solutions to transform the behaviour of individuals and communities associated with energy consumption through incentives and service models. Essentially, they're a developer. They have influence about how their residents use energy, but they don't have control. So they've said, how can we use the circular economy to incentivize a reduction in energy? What we know from a study that was undertaken is that in Yarrabilba, 50% of the plug load from a house comes from their kitchen. So during the Circular Economy Lab, we developed the idea of kitchen as a subscription. Essentially, in this model, 5 of Fisher and Paykel's most energy efficient appliances will be offered on a subscription basis. So that's the business model, product as a service. RACQ, which is an insurance provider here in Australia, are also part of the lab and are participating, as well as Movis, who has an IoT device that monitors the health of machines and energy consumption. There will also be on-demand servicing and end-of-life solution for e-waste. The next case study we want to share with you is from 2019, when we started work on 2 retail assets in the Queensland Investment Corporation's property and retail portfolio. The objective of our work with QIC is to provide them with scalable and replicable circular economy projects in order to increase economic, social, and environmental performance across their portfolio. Understanding that QIC portfolio constitutes of more than 23 retail assets, where we chose to work on Robina. So the Robina Town Centre is the second largest shopping centre on the Gold Coast, covering 34 hectares with 7 anchor tenants and over 400 retail outlets. So to establish the circular economy project opportunities for QIC, we completed a site visit, a waste audit, interviewed key stakeholders, and looked at circular material flows, eventually settling on food waste. We undertook a cost-benefit analysis where we assessed 10 different solutions for food waste on site, from on-site larvae systems through to macerating the food waste for input into the wastewater treatment systems. We then helped QIC develop measurement indicators to measure the circularity of each solution and compare this against total system cost. And the last project I want to share with you is our work with Mirvac, helping them to explore and action circular economy projects to increase livability and deliver superior amenity in their master plan communities in Victoria. We are working with the Olivine team from Mirvac to demonstrate circular economy principles and business models in the design, construction, and operation of a home. In this project, we'll be drawing on international best practice, as well as focusing on the lifestyle opportunities of the circular economy. So when considering how to build a circular home, office tower, or any built environment structure, the approach we take is to break the dwelling down into a layering framework that was developed by 2 architects Stuart Brand and Frank Duffy back in the 1970s. Essentially, this methodology looks at each layer of a building from its longest lifespan to its shortest. For each of the layers, the question becomes, how do we incorporate the principles of a circular economy? In the interest of time, I'm just going to share 2 examples from the circular economy approaches that we are applying to the different layers. So the first example I want to share with you is in the structure layer, which is the building's skeleton, including the foundation and load-bearing elements. So embedding circular economy in this layer means designing for disassembly, designing with minimal materials and minimal variety of materials, which optimizes easy repairs and maintenance and potential extension or relocation of the building. For this layer, an example of its application is our consideration of the most appropriate slab type. We are determined to design out the use of waffle pod, which is polystyrene in the slab. We really need to weigh up the thermal mass benefits of a concrete slab versus a pier and beam slab. It also means looking at where virgin materials can be substituted for secondary materials, such as using the fly ash from coal-fired power stations in the concrete, or using ground granulated blast furnace slag from iron ore production, pardon me, or using crumbed rubber concrete in the plastic or steel formwork. The next example I'd like to share with you is in the space layer. The space is the solid internal fit out, including the walls and the floors. This is the component of a home that undergoes the most replacement in order for buildings to be adapted to changing occupants' requirements. It is, therefore, a question of optimizing the versatility and adaptability without affecting the remaining building layers. So in this particular layer, we are considering how we design and build for modularity and multifunctionality. We know that this community is multi-generational and oftentimes grandparents, aunties, uncles, they all move back home and in with the family. So to accommodate the changing needs of families over lifetimes, we are putting our wiring in the floors to easily accommodate the changing of walls. We're also using mechanical joints. We're using modular carpet and floor tiles to allow for easy replacement in high wear points. This project will be formally launched in February next year, with the house build being completed by September 2021. The intention will be to use this project to educate both builders and buyers alike about the benefits of the circular economy in the built environment. The second project we'll be delivering for Mirvac is the use of multifunctional spaces that are responsive and reflective of the olivine community's needs, skills, and interests. Extensive community engagement will be undertaken with support from the local social enterprise to ensure we have meaningful conversations about the community's needs and ultimately develop a skills register. Our team will then work with the urban design team to ensure that we build spaces, both indoor and outdoor, that are reflective of these needs, as well as modular to serve multiple needs and multiple generations all within the community. And the final project we are working on with Mirvac is focused on using Mirvac's position within the Australian construction industry and the development community to essentially raise the bar. So this will involve facilitating circular economy construction forums with the local olivine community, inclusive of Mirvac, builders, civil engineers, the local and state government, all thinking about how we apply circular economy principles to try and tackle this entrenched and wicked challenges. This forum will then be followed up by a second forum that will bring together Australia's development community to further drive pre-competitive collaboration opportunities to further advance the transition toward a circular economy. Okay, thank you so much for having me. Sorry that I had to turn off my video. I can't have notes and screens at the same time, but I now understand you've got another presenter and I'll hang around for Q&A afterwards. So thank you so much again.
Well, thank you, Janie. Please give us let's give them or Janie a virtual applause. And we really thank your presentation. It's been really interesting and impressive in how not only to hear about the principles, but also you being able to put in practice circular economy in the construction sector. It will be now essential that at local level here in Chile, where we lead or learn how to make the way for these examples and as basis to distinguish how to build on a sustainable way and how not. Without a doubt, Chile has a long way to go on this matter, and we thanks you again, Janie, for your interesting presentation. Now we'll go ahead with our second presentation speaker. I will leave you with Shiva Surla. He's Managing Director of Renergy Asia, who will speak us about circularity and construction and how it's strongly linked to innovation. For sure, this is going to be an interesting presentation. Shiva is based in Singapore, and we really appreciate your time with us here. We're starting our morning today. I know it's late or next day for you. So, well, good morning for us and good afternoon for you, and or good evening. And thank you very much for being here. So please go ahead. And I'll just before your presentation, remind you that at the end of your presentation, we'll have a round of question and answers that we'll be sharing with Jamie. So please go ahead, Shiva, and thank you very much again.
Hi, Carlos. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Philip and Matthias. Wonderful to be here. I missed the beginning of Janie's presentation, but I got in midway and I really enjoyed whatever you're doing, Jane. In fact, we are trying out a lot of on-site insect processing of organic waste streams as well. So it's very exciting to learn about what you're doing. So thanks for sharing that. A very good morning to everyone from Chile. I'm dialing in from Singapore. My name is Shiva Susarla. I'm the founder and managing director of Renergy. You can see the name here. The last two letters are a double I. You can see our website at renergy.com. That's RENERGII.com. We also run a knowledge platform called Circular Cities Asia. So you can find us at circularcities.asia as well. The idea is to at Circular Cities Asia is to foster a network of urban circular economy practitioners, bring them together, create conversations, create knowledge, and build the ecosystem for circular economy in this part of the world. It's wonderful to be here, wonderful to see you all. So let me share my screen. I have put together a little presentation for you. I would like to present a view of circularity for the built environment, how we see it at Renergy and the role we see for innovation. I want to clarify before I start that I am not an architect. We work very closely with architects and building designers, but I am not an architect. I don't have any background in construction. I consider myself a circular economy systems and innovation thinker. And as an organization, that's what we do. So we are Renergy. We innovate for circular cities. We are an innovation studio. We make Asian cities 000, which means zero waste, zero carbon, and zero pollution urban spaces. And like you know, the built environment plays an absolutely key role in achieving this goal. We use circular economy principles to make Asian cities resilient, ecologically sustainable, and livable. We combine innovation experience, an understanding of urban systems, and a network of partnerships to test and launch new ideas. Some of them work, some of them don't. Wherever the ideas work, we spin them off as new products or solutions. Broadly, our interest areas as an organization, we're interested in food systems. How can cities produce their own food? How can food transportation be zero waste? How can food waste streams be upcycled and not wasted? We're interested in urban built environments. How can we make built environments fully circular, right? How do we maximize the utilization of existing building stock? How do we upcycle material? How do we use alternative materials so that the footprint of new buildings is lower? How do we make buildings zero waste operationally? So one is the construction itself, but a completely different aspect is the amount of waste buildings generate when people live and use those buildings. So how can we make them operationally zero waste and divert 95% of waste streams away from landfills or incinerators? We are interested in urban mobility systems as well, zero pollution, net zero carbon models for urban transport, multimodal holistic approach we like to take for transport and not focus only on electric vehicles. But here's the thing, even though they look like separate systems, there are strong interactions between food, buildings, and transport. And we strongly believe that new urban design is going to operate at the convergence of all these systems. And we need to optimize the full system rather than focus on individual subcomponents of it. About me, my background is in innovation. I'm an engineer with a degree in business as well. I've worked in the area of renewable energy, clean tech, mostly from an investment side in the beginning, but later on as a consultant and advisor. Done a lot of work in mobility, in built environment efficiency, energy efficiency for the built environments, in urban energy systems, especially for rooftop energy and so on. You can find more on our website. I'm happy to connect with any of you to discuss more. All my recent work is in the innovation space. Okay, so let's talk about the built environment in Asia, right? 70% of the buildings in Asia that will be around in 2050 are yet to be built. This is exciting for people in real estate, in construction, in property development. This is absolutely exciting. It's a huge growth industry. It's an amazing business to be in. From an ecological standpoint, from a livability standpoint, though, we are actually sitting on a ticking time bomb, and this is why. Construction of the 70% new buildings will need about 3.2 trillion tons of new materials to be extracted. 3.2 trillion tons. Just to place that in context, right? Since the beginning of the industrial era until now, the total material extracted is about 800 billion tons. Total in the last 120 years. Just in the next 30 years, we're going to do 4 times as much. That's the kind of new material we need. Bulk of this material, as we all know, is concrete, steel, and wood. 3 very, very, very important resources. 2 of them are very, very carbon intensive, and the third, if not managed well, can be carbon intensive. In fact, could lead to mass deforestation as well. There's some other challenges in Asia. Asia is the most densely populated region in the world. Conventional design approaches may not work. If you take the typical housing and space availability standards in the West, in Europe and in the US, and apply the same to Asia, given the populations here, we may not have enough land to have that kind of a space, that kind of housing space and living space for people. We'll have to come up with new design approaches. So it's not just, is there a material constraint, but we're also having a land space availability constraint in Asia. So we need to completely reimagine how to do this. There are also some other challenges, right? A lot of Asian cities in recent years have gone high up, right? So Dubai, Singapore, Beijing, Bombay, they're all great examples, Shanghai, Kuala Lumpur. But these need a lot of steel and concrete. Now, if we switch to alternative materials, currently, structurally, we can't go so high. So we may need lower buildings that occupy more space. So what is the sweet spot for these trade-offs? and what kind of compromises do architects and designers and urban planners have to make? It's not clear. The jury is still out. We believe that circularity or implementing principles of the circular economy in the built environment could be one answer to the built environment problem in Asia. We have an internal framework that we use. We're trying to test out a lot of this. It's based on innovation. It's based on new design thinking. But it draws heavily on existing examples, existing principles of the circular economy, existing advances and developments in the area of construction technology and architectural design, right? So we do work with a lot of architects to sort of draw heavily on their work. So this is our framework for circular built environments. It has 4 major components, ladies and gentlemen, and we are thinking about whether a 5th component makes sense given the new developments in Singapore in the last 2 years. The 4 components are as follows. Designing for disassembly. A circular built environment is a built environment that's designed for disassembly. It's a built environment that's designed for mixed use. Buildings are designed for operational efficiency, cost efficiency, in other words. They're designed for operational zero waste. A 5th component that we are considering is, hey, can buildings be optimized? Can building design be optimized for food production in cities, right? And I don't know if you're following the latest trends in Singapore. A lot of that is happening in Paris and France as well. We are trying out the most ambitious experiment globally for rooftop farm design. So the Singapore government recently announced a tender for 9 large rooftops, and they're sort of awarded the tenders to farming companies, vertical farming companies, to set up rooftop farms and supply to local residential estates. It's a bold experiment. So we believe that it has a lot of positive implications and it could contribute to circularity as well. So it's a new element that we are considering including in our framework. Let me take you through each of these frameworks. I won't go too much in detail because of the time constraint, but I would love to have detailed meetings or conversations or follow-up session if any of these are interesting. Let's talk about the first component. Sorry about this. Okay, the first component, designing for disassembly. What does it mean, right? It's not new. It's an existing concept in architectural design right now, somehow not widely implemented. There are 2 aspects to this, modular construction and material passports, right? And we believe both are major enablers of designing for disassembly. In the modular construction approach, we have permanent modular construction and relocatable buildings. Both obviously have to meet local guidelines wherever they're deployed for building design. But these are the 2 existing approaches. I want to give the example of Star Apartments in Los Angeles. There's a building that was designed and implemented in 2014. It's an example of permanent modular construction. So there was a first level building upon which they've deployed about 100 apartments that were completely prefabricated elsewhere and brought here. The core base structure was reinforced with concrete. And then this prefabricated modular apartments were deployed and assembled on top of the base, right? A super efficient design. It prevented the demolition of the underlying structure. The underlying structure still continues to be a commercial space, and they've beautifully sort of augmented the existing structure to build about 100 apartments that were constructed elsewhere and just deployed here, almost like Lego in action. So beautiful example of permanent modular construction. Look up Star Apartments. There's a lot of literature available on this. So I love this design and I love using this example as a great demonstration of how permanent modular construction can take place. Relocatable buildings, of course, even during COVID, we saw how hospital structures were sprung up, how wards for patients sprung up in different countries to support needs of patients. And these are all buildings that can be wound up. Temporary event spaces are another great example. The Dubai Expo is happening next year. And the Singapore Pavilion there is an example of a relocatable building which can be taken down and the components can be used elsewhere. So this is the first component of designing for disassembly. The second very important component of designing for disassembly is a tool that we call as a material passport. We are trying to implement a material passport for some individual buildings as part of our advisory service. But the European Union itself is trying to create a continent-wide material passport platform. So what's a material passport, right? It enables for tracing of materials in a building, recovery of those materials, and repurposing and trading of those materials. So each PCM in a building, product or component or material block, is a data record now. So it's essentially a database, a digital database of all the products, the components of the materials in a building structure. There's a lot of information available on the specs of that product or component or material. There are regular maintenance and health safety certificates, usability certificates uploaded as part of that database. When the building reaches the end of its useful life, instead of demolishing the whole building, we now recover the products, components, materials, and repurpose them in a different building. This is particularly doable for fit outs and components and materials used within a structure, but we could also, depending on construction technology and guidelines, do it for structural components as well. Very, very powerful concept. The concept of material passports, I think, can be a game changer for circularity in the built environment. I would love to talk to potential companies in Chile if there's any interest in trying this out. It's an amazing tool. Please look up the Building Materials Passport of European Union. That's probably the most comprehensive database available globally right now. We are trying to do it for specific buildings and trying to build momentum in Singapore for an island-wide material passport platform in the long term. Right. Another sort of aspect to designing for disassembly is the use of alternative materials. We have an insect farming facility in Indonesia, and we've built that structure entirely out of bamboo. It saved us a lot of money. It reduced our construction time. So it's amazing, and it can be taken down. It's actually a net negative carbon building because the bamboo offsets, sequesters carbon as it grows. The other alternative materials increasingly becoming common in some countries, like hempcrete is a great example. Mycelium-based bricks are another great example. We have one startup company that uses mycelium, and we're exploring the use of first for internal wall augmentation and other such use cases using mycelium, right? Material passports also incentivize architects to design for disassembly. So we see that as a very, very important component. You can see the picture here. It's a snapshot of the materials passport platform prototype that's used in the European Union. This is available online. You can go and check it out in the BAM, Buildings as Material Bank project of the European Union. Right. The multi-use design approach is obviously very commonplace right now globally. People are combining use cases, and a great example is the Tanjong Pagar Center in Singapore. Combines hospitality, residential, commercial, entertainment spaces all in one type of approach. And that is an important enabler of circularity, because here's the thing, right? There was a study in the UK, and they examined each building typology, and they said, hey, what is the utilization of each building in each typology, in each typological class, right? Commercial, residential, etc., etc. And they realize that some buildings are used less than 40% of the time. So we've built these magnificent structures and they're barely used, right? So multi-use design improves utilization, improves asset efficiency and optimization. This kind of thinking is coming across in almost all aspects of urban design, even in mobility. Uber is a great example of maximizing utilization of cars, because most cars sold were parked for a long time. So similar thinking is coming in buildings as well. But there's a second element to the design for mixed use: adaptable design. How can we take one space and design it such that it can be repurposed differently for different use cases? Maybe it serves as an office space in the daytime, a dorm in the night, play space or recreational space during weekends. During pandemics, it can be converted maybe into a hospital. How can the same space be adapted instantaneously for different use cases? It's a huge design challenge, but I think this is the type of thinking that will enable circularity, right? By promoting mixed use in buildings. So this is the second element, second pillar of our circular framework: design for mixed use. The first one was disassembly. The third one, design for operational zero waste. The problem with waste management in buildings is that a lot of buildings are not optimized for management of waste. They are maximized for revenue generation. If we recognize the existence of waste, if we estimate the waste that will be generated accurately, and if we plan for the flow of material waste, plan for waste as a material and for its flow through the building, we can actually have operationally zero waste buildings. If you notice the difference between this pillar and the first two actually pertain to the design of buildings and the materials used. This is after the building is constructed and started beginning to get used. How can we divert 95% of the waste from landfills? How can we ensure that buildings segregate waste well, process waste on site, and as much as possible, don't send waste to the landfills? We collaborate closely with the Center for Zero Waste Design in New York City. They've a couple of years ago, they designed the Zero Waste Design Guidelines for buildings in NYC. It's emerged as a de facto go-to guide for architects in New York City. We're trying to bring the same principles to Singapore right now in collaboration with the Zero Waste Design Center. Please look up the Zero Waste Design Center. If there's an opportunity to do something like this in Santiago, we would love to try it out in collaboration with our New York City partner and design a building zero waste code for buildings in Santiago, right? So an important aspect tool for designing for operational zero waste is the zero waste calculator. Like I said, most buildings underestimate the amount of waste produced. A waste calculator tool allows architects and designers and urban planners, depending on the typology, the end use cases, we can actually get an estimate of how much waste will be generated. Right now, the calculator is based on data from the US, but we're trying to optimize it for data from Singapore. We would love to do that in Santiago as well, as if there is interest, right? And there are solutions for building scale, district scale, as well as urban scale. The last aspect is designing for operational cost efficiency. Singapore does a lot of work in this space. Labor is very expensive. Labor is not available in Singapore. Sand is a very scarce resource. So we have some fantastic advancements in optimizing the cost structure for buildings, because ultimately circularity has to have a bottom line fewer money spent is we believe a more optimal way to design and manage buildings. So there's a lot of digitalization possible here. In Singapore, we're already creating digital twins for each building here, first even at a city scale, but each large building, they're actually creating digital twins for remote management of the assets, remote troubleshooting, etc. There are new business models emerging so that the building developers can actually reduce the cost for themselves. This also promotes circularity. I'll use the example of a staircase. Right now, a staircase is a fixed capital expenditure, but maybe we can have staircase manufacturers or elevator manufacturers in the future charging buildings and tenants based on usage, right? And this optimizes how they design, how they size their buildings, and so on. So when we see the possibility of moving from a capex-based model to an OpEx-based model, and we see that as an essential pillar of circularity, right? I'll stop right here. Philip gave me 30 minutes. I think I've used up about 25. I'll stop right here. But I also want to give the example of, again, the fifth pillar. We discussed 4 pillars here, these 4. But before I stop, I want to talk about the possibility of food production as well. We are seeing the rise of urban farming and food production technologies, alternative proteins that are now produced in buildings. Now, we don't have farms located 100 kilometers away from cities. We are talking about cities producing half the food they need at least. We're talking about food production in labs in cities, producing vegetables on rooftops. We see that as a great way to reduce the carbon footprint of cities and actually maximize utilization. So how can we design the built environment in cities for food production as well? So that's a pillar we are working on incorporating and make it a 5-pillar framework. But at this point, it's still 4. I'll stop right here. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions or brainstorm with you all. Thank you all.
Well, thank you very much, Shiva. We give you a loud virtual applause, and thank you again very much, and very interesting and impressive and shocking, everything you've been mentioning. Without a doubt, it's a lot to talk about this, and so we'll now give on to start the question panel, which will moderate with Catherine, which will be Catherine Martinez from the Chilean Chamber of Construction, the Corporation of Sustainable Development. She's a deputy manager in sustainability also. And so let's start with our questions, and so I'm sure we can follow the conversation. I will start with the first. For you, it's which do you think are the principal challenges to promote circular economy in a global way? So I mean, to common people, how we promote or how we get people to know circularity. Maybe Janie, you can start. Give us an answer.
Sure, Carlos. Thank you for that. I think the primary challenge, or maybe the greatest opportunity to reframe it, is to share case studies, because what we know from actioning the circular economy over the last 3 years is that I think the concept can feel a little bit nebulous to a lot of people until it's really grounded in, well, what does this look like? So what does circular economy mean when we're talking about the cooling systems or HVAC of a building? And a really good demonstration of circular economy when applied to HVAC is thinking about, instead of a building owning all of their own air conditioning infrastructure, they're now being able to purchase this as a service. So essentially, that's designing out waste, it's improving operational efficiencies and cost savings. It's also having significant environmental benefits. So I think the greatest opportunity is to really demonstrate circular economy in practice. And I think, yeah, being able to tell stories about success is helpful.
Oh, absolutely agree, Jen. I think that's a great sort of point you make. I'll just add on saying the concept of sustainability in green buildings itself is not new, right? We have building codes in all countries, in all cities. There are incentives for green building design and so on. A lot of the focus, and rightly so, because the last couple of decades has been the main focus area. A lot of the focus has been in green building codes has been on energy and water usage, right? That was because materials was not so much a problem. Going forward, I think we also need to think about materials and waste, and they have to factor into building codes. So the first level is what Jane said: diffusion of case studies, diffusion of knowledge globally through case studies, sharing, better documentation, more sharing sessions like this. The second aspect is how, for example, policymakers and regulators also think about incorporating circularity as a requirement and remove the nebulous nature of circularity that Jane was talking about, translate that into incentives, into guidelines, into check boxes that developers can tick. And that, I think, will play a big role.
Thank you so much, Chiva and Janie, for joining us today. I have another question for you regarding collaboration and who should be leading this change. Do you think that in countries less developed than Singapore or Australia, like Chile, do you think that should be the government leading this kind of development or leading the way to circular economy? Or in another perspective, should be a big group like the Chilean Construction Chamber the leader in this kind of change, private or public sector? What do you think about this?
Jane, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start. To be honest, all of those actors that you just suggested, both government, industry, and member-based bodies, everyone has a role to play. And so I don't really have an answer for who should lead, because I think it is a collaborative and systemic effort. Everybody needs to come to the table and recognize the levers that they have to pull and how they will work with. So if it's government, and as Shiva mentioned before, like their policy and regulatory arms, but that will have an impact on how industry picks those up and then uses them in their developments. Equally, the people that are housed in these developments, so consumers, will have a role to play in how they interact with these system changes. So for me, there's no clear leader. I think everyone has a role. Shiva?
Yeah, no, well, absolutely agree. I think all stakeholders are important. We are an innovation company, right? And just to ensure that I don't repeat what Jane said, but add on something slightly more to what she said. One thing that we as an innovation company, or you as a chamber could do, Catherine, is to actually demonstrate how new innovation based on circular economy can actually lead to better outcomes for property developers, for architects, and for tenants, users of the buildings, right? So if we help them save money, if we help them get more revenues, revenue realization per square foot of built area, if we help them make construction cheaper, if we help them make maintenance cheaper through use of tools and push circularity as an agenda, I think we'll have market traction. So it needs a lot of new innovation. I want to sort of use the concept of digital twins as an example. Digital twins significantly reduce the cost for building maintenance, but they didn't come because the government mandated it. Entrepreneurs built digital twins or tools for digital twins, and because there was a market problem they were solving, they were paying customers, the developers were willing to pay for it, right? So I think innovation for which customers are going to pay is critical, and we have to ensure that that innovation is also circular, almost sort of circularity by stealth, in my view. Sorry, I rambled a bit, but you know what I mean, right?
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Janie. I will go on and using the opportunity we're talking with 3 parts of the world and focusing now in Chile, where population is much less than Asia-based countries, we're only 18 million. So my question is, or the question I'm giving you from the audience is, what do you think about about models in low populated areas, or as Chile as a country? Is the same model, or is there any other characteristics we should apply into, or just imitate markets, developed markets, or as you were doing in Singapore? But maybe Janie first. Australia, we know you have also low populated areas and not only big populated cities. So what you can tell us about?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, because the question becomes a question of scale. But if we're focusing on the first principle of a circular economy, so designing out waste and pollution, I think thinking about that, the concept of scale sometimes isn't as relevant when you're thinking about designing with waste. So to the point of how we construct our cities and our buildings, there's ample opportunities to consider, replacing virgin raw materials with bio-based or renewable or recovered materials. And that doesn't really matter about the size of a population or population density. I think thinking about more regional areas, we do a lot of work with several governments around Australia in regional areas. And when you're thinking about the scale of a town, for example, that's several thousand people, you really have to take a systemic view of the town and the material flows as a whole, as opposed to one little building or one little community center, and think about how materials flow in and around and out of places like that. But there's always opportunities.
Yeah, an awesome point. You actually, Jane's in Australia. We are in Asia, right? We have, for us, 200,000 people is a small village in Asia. In almost all Asian countries, there's no sparsely populated Asian country at all. So I actually see it as a huge advantage. There's some disadvantages. You don't get scale in sharing models, for example, because of your sparse population, which is a barrier to circularity, like Jane pointed out right now. But I actually see the availability of space and the lower population as an advantage in some other aspects. I think it's a great opportunity for Chile to try out alternative materials and actually become a leader of using alternative materials in the world and set the pathway for all of us. And maybe a great way to start is the housing market. Really push for significant policy change and really disrupt housing construction technology with alternative materials, with even maybe large-scale prefabricated homes that will significantly reduce the impact, design for disassembly. So these kind of models, I think, could be fantastic to try out in Chile, and it could be a great opportunity for Chile also to establish themselves as a world leader in this space, I think.
Thank you so much, Shiva and Janie. And Shiva, it seems that there are lots of opportunities for innovation in new developments, but what do you think about refurbishment or retrofitting of existing buildings? Do you think that there are a lot of opportunities as well?
So it's a huge problem. So I think to be quite pragmatic and practical, right? The opportunity for introducing or retrofitting existing building stock with new materials is somewhat limited, right? There is no business case for it. Existing owners of building stock don't really see the need for it. There is one opportunity though, I think. The whole aspect of retrofitting existing building stock with attributes that reduce operational waste, right? Buildings generate significant waste. That I think is an opportunity. You can probably introduce design aspects as well as technology and tools that reduce how much waste gets generated and how it gets processed. In fact, sharing ideas could, or district or urban scale solutions could deliver better savings in countries with sparse population, right? Because you now have economies of scale because you're sort of delivering solutions to maybe 100, 200 buildings in one shot. So that's where I think the focus should be for existing building stock, operational zero waste.
Thank you, Shiva. And Janie, what do you think about retrofitting or existing buildings? Do you think that there are some opportunities on circular economy?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Shiva's point about the challenges of retrofitting from a commercial perspective, but also just from a technical perspective. I think in our work with developers across Australia, we've really learned that the opportunities probably more lie with tenant engagement and education. So, you know, if you're targeting operational zero waste, there are things you can do to retrofit systems. But the question more becomes about consumer behavior. So how can you support building the people that will come and work in these spaces to interact with new systems and really start source separating? So if we're gonna give them new infrastructure or new waste infrastructure, we need to teach them about how to use it, and more importantly, why. What is the value of the materials they hold in their hands? Where will those materials go after they leave their hands? And what value will these materials contribute to the community around them? I think that's an incredibly important tool, is education and empowerment in existing building stock.
Thank you, Janie and Shiva. I'll go on with the next question from the audience. It's talking about sustainability on circular economy concepts are perceived, at least in this question here in Chile, as a very conceptually, not necessarily active and real advances. And the question goes in how we can go forward in an active circular economy, depending on governments, people, or companies. What can we do on a day-to-day transformation from concepts to reality or active? Please.
Sure, I can probably start. Firstly, to try and separate out sustainability from circular economy, because they're not the same thing. So how we talk about it is sustainability is a state. And essentially, since the Industrial Revolution, we've been in a degenerative society. So we're taking more than we give back to the system. Sustainability seeks to take as much as we give, but in a circular economy, we need to be regenerative. So we need to give back more to the system than we take. Also, a really fundamental difference between sustainability and circular economy is that circular economy has very practical principles and business models, as well as enablers that essentially act as a toolkit for change. So when thinking about actions that you can incentivize or advocate for or implement, I always bring it back to those three principles: designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials at their highest value for as long as possible, and regenerating natural systems. Anytime we're faced with a decision, a new client, a new organization, I ask myself those three questions. How can we do that? And something else that's really important to learn is that in a circular economy, it is almost impossible to do it by yourself. Any organization, you will always need to interact with your communities, your supply chains, your regulators. And so inevitably, the act of having those conversations about how you can collaboratively design for a circular economy will educate and empower more people to change more things.
Absolutely agree. If I have to add on something to that, I would say I would go back to Jane's first example. Let's try and do some case studies, guys. Let's find a developer who's willing to, for example, try and implement a material passport for the building from the ground up. Let's try and find a developer who might be interested in modular design. And this is for newer building stock, right? Maybe they would be interested in considering aspects of operational zero waste. So if there's a possibility of finding one or two property developers who are willing to try out some of the concepts for the newer buildings, that would be amazing, because it'll help them save money, hopefully. And we should do it only if there's a business case, right, for them, not for the heck of doing it. Let's demonstrate the business case. Let's try something out and make it a fantastic case study and make a splash around it, and sort of educate stakeholders in the country about that building. In the same vein, we also have to take maybe an existing complex, an existing housing block, or an existing building, and see if we can make it circular in some way and demonstrate cost savings or end of life salvage cost, salvage revenues out of it. And that, I think, will be powerful signal for new property developers and architects.
Thank you so much again for sharing your experience. I also want to ask you about your own experience with your companies, and what can you suggest to the professionals that are attending today? Do you think there are lots of opportunities for new startups or entrepreneurships that come into the system and help industry and government to deal with circular economy issues? What do you suggest, and how you can encourage people to start new business and new innovations in this area?
I feel like
Maybe
I should pass it.
You have a great experience with your sister Ashley.
Yeah, I was going to say, for us, it was only at the beginning of 2017 that we were literally two sisters on a bedroom floor trying to think about how we could design for circular economy. And now we have delivered over 70 circular economy projects. We have 17 members in 2 offices, and we work in different countries. And so, for us, we have always tried to take the circular economy out of theory and put it into practice. And ultimately, what we seek to do as a business is solve people's problems. And as an entrepreneur, if you can do that and people will pay you for it, you've got a business. So for us, we find the circular economy, it's how we help our clients and our customers and our organization. But there are so many opportunities in this space because there are so many challenges. And, I really want to hear from Shiva, because I feel like, the innovation space is such an exciting and opportunity-filled arena at the moment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what we do. It's our bread and butter. It's what we do for a living. I want to present a couple of things that happen really well in Singapore. I call it the living lab and the test bedding approach. So what happens in Singapore is the Building and Construction Authority and the Singapore Green Building Council, they actually work with the large property developers to develop building challenges, design challenges, and actually promise entrepreneurs the opportunity to deploy a pilot project if they can show that they can solve a certain challenge. So let's say developer A, a large developer in Singapore, is grappling with a specific challenge revolving around circularity, right, or efficiency or whatever. They present that challenge and they do an open call for innovators to solve that challenge through a new idea, with the promise that if the idea is reasonable, they will offer their new project as a testing bed for that solution. Right? So this kind of a living lab test bedding approach actually really can foster entrepreneurship, because a big challenge for new entrepreneurs in this space is they don't get enough opportunities to deploy. The first project is always a challenge. So if we can help new entrepreneurs deploy, get a pilot, show proof of concept, it's very powerful. And I think it's a significant enabler of new innovation. An immediate area for innovation that comes to mind is actually alternative building materials. That space is exploding globally, right? New concrete design, new materials for bricks, new materials for paints, space is lit, new materials for flooring, carpet. It's just exploded, actually. Amazing circular economy entrepreneurs coming up with great ideas that sort of keep materials in closed loops and so on. Then there are digital tools like material passports, waste calculators, all very, very doable for-profit ideas. All they need is some encouragement from local Chilean large property developers and construction companies to maybe try out some of the ideas. And again, if there's any possibility or willingness to design an innovation program, I think Jay and we can find a way to collaborate with you and design and implement it in Chile.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. Good. Thank you, Chiva and Janie. We know it's late for you guys in Singapore, Australia. So we go on with our last two questions tonight for you, this morning for us. Now, I want to take you to the relationship between the construction or the business sector and the academy or the universities. Not only in terms of, well, of course, in terms of circular economy, but I'm referring on in this question on what's things as the formation of new professionals, the research and development, and also the relationship between companies and the universities. What's your experience? What can you tell us on that?
Sure, I can start. So I think in Australia, we have some phenomenal academic institutions, but I think some challenges that they've had historically is really translating this incredible body of knowledge into tangible business outcomes. So our research sector, they have such a role to play in the transition toward a circular economy, really in that deep expertise around material development, but that commercialization has been the bridge that they need to gap. And I think at the moment, we've got a couple of really well-known universities, particularly University of Technology in Sydney, that is pioneering different material selection, as Shiva mentioned before, material types. And I think it's also really interesting about how universities now approaching curriculum design and how they educate their students, both from an undergraduate, master's and postgraduate level, regarding circular economy and entrepreneurship and innovation. And it's a really clear signal that our Australian government is also directing a significant investment into the academic sector to pioneer different business models within a circular economy. So it's in a really evolving space in Australia at the moment.
It's very exciting. There's definitely a disconnect, right? So the two academic departments that have the most impact on policy and regulation is one, the schools of architecture in general, right? They have an outsized influence on building design and regulations. The other academic discipline is civil engineering, right? A related discipline is environmental. These three disciplines have an outsized influence on how regulation and policy is shaped. But here's the thing, most of the new innovation is coming from completely different disciplines. It's coming from the fields of chemistry, it's coming from the field of energy, it's coming from the field of material designers, it's coming from the fields of artificial intelligence and computing. So there is a disconnect, because these guys don't have an influence. They don't even know how to get through the approval process, right? So it'll be great if, for example, industry associations and industry bodies widen the consultation for policy making and design of codes and so on. In terms of something on the ground, before COVID hit, we were talking about a concept called circular campuses, right? Or circular universities. It follows the concept of green campus. So we wanted to go to universities and actually work with all the existing academic departments on a certain university and say, how can we make your campus completely circular, right? Close the material, energy, water, and waste loops on your campus so that you can actually show and demonstrate to others outside. So we were designing that concept when COVID hit and sort of it went on the back burner. But that's something I would love to explore, circular innovation on campus with the purpose of closing the 4 important loops for circularity on the campus as a way to show the way for others. Because it's infinitely more tricky to do it outside, but on the campus, it's much easier. So circular campuses could be a sort of on the ground way of trying to involve universities and the power of the intellectual capital on the university into these kind of new challenges.
Thank you, Shiv and Janie. And this call for more cases, for more applications of circular economy, and how we can, again, improve collaboration between different stakeholders in industry, academy, and government. And in this area, how do you think it's the relevance of research and development investment from industry, and how research and development investment can help to increase new developments in circular economy?
Yeah, I think there needs to be a big focus on research and development in not just the academic sector, but also the construction and development sector, and everyone who has, I suppose, a role to play in this transition toward a circular economy. And I think, to Shiva's point earlier, again, around the opportunity around materials, just looking at one lens through a circular economy, before, you're going to see a building made out of hemp or a building made out of mycelium or, like new innovative material types, there needs to be significant testing in different built environment, climates. So that all takes time and research and energy. So there, significant need for it, but it's all happening as well.
Yeah, I think developers, construction companies, property developers, they always invest in R&D. They're very, very few forward-looking in general. And they understand the economics of construction way better than me or Jane, for example, right? You guys are the industry experts. Now, there has to be a business case, obviously, and there has to be some threat of disruption, either that they see from a cost or availability or affordability perspective that will incentivize and spur, or from a regulatory perspective, right? One of the policy design in Singapore, I remember about 10 years ago, was that the NEA and the BCA here, the agencies, they allowed property developers an extra level in their buildings if they actually met the standards for extreme energy efficiency, right? So similarly, if there are regulatory incentives to do R&D, this kind of incentive is very, very powerful, right? Because an extra level means significant uptick in revenue for the property developer. So that will automatically spur further investment in new innovation. One area that I would love to see more investment in is business model innovation. So one is obviously technology, new materials, new, building technologies, and those will take time. Like Jenny said, we have to test before we get approval. The lower hanging fruit is business model innovation. How can we separate, for example, the structure from the fit outs that are offered as a service? How can different building components be offered through a service or incentive model? There are so many new opportunities for trying out things. And that's where I think industry can see immediate results. And that's where I would love to see some additional investments, personally, at least.
Absolutely agree, Shiva and Janie. It's been really interesting. It's been an honor to listen to your views, your insights, and your experience in circularity and all what you've mentioned tonight. For you today, for us. And in order to time, we'll leave questions until here. And without any doubt, this is giving us a lot to talk nowadays. So many thanks to Janie Morris, Director of Operations at Corio, and also to Shiva, Managing Director at Genergy Asia. We'll keep in touch with you. Thank you very much again, and we'll see you soon, I hope, and have a nice night these days. Thank you. And
thank you.
goodbye.
Thank you for this opportunity. I mean, we are, at least I'm not an architect, I'm not an urban planner, and yet you sort of humored us with our perspectives on the subject, being experts yourself. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Janie. Thank you for all the audience today. Thank you, Catherine, also, and see you soon. Goodbye.